Hey there, my name is Fela Abioye, and this is How to Corporate, my digital show about how successful professionals navigate career moves and money matters. Today's topic, how to leverage soft skills, with my guest, Lindsay Fisher. So welcome back, guys. Appreciate you joining us again today. Another very special topic with another very special guest, leveraging soft skills. Definitely feel like that's an underutilized skill set for a lot of folks, but Lindsay today is going to help us kind of walk through that. She is an insurance leader. She's faculty for a Goldman Sachs 100K small business program, and she's a chair of a soft skills development program called Accelerate, which focuses on increasing one's emotional intelligence, EQ, helping folks learn to leverage their network, and identifying social interaction and having employee entrepreneurial mindset. So welcome, Lindsay. Really appreciate you taking the time today to join us on the podcast. But I guess I want to give you a little second to introduce yourself a little bit to the folks. But first and foremost, of course, like I said, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Fela. Thanks for having me and inviting me to be a part of this really special podcast. I think what you're doing is so important. Those unspoken rules of how to navigate corporate America are tricky. They're tricky. And so, yeah, like you said, I work in the insurance industry, but my background is mainly or heavily in HR and operations. So, and right now on the insurance side, I'm really focused on employee benefits. So I stay plugged into the human resources world through a lot of my clients and all the various conversations and company cultures that you learn about just every day through everyday interactions. And, working with the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program, you're learning about the different challenges that employers and small business owners are facing when it comes to the people aspect of things. Because the component that I'm really focused on with that is called It's the People. And so it's all about how do you intentionally build company culture? And, that comes into play thinking of what are the types of traits and people that we're looking for in order to build our organization and, accomplish our vision. And so that really, soft skills are a big part of that when you think about values, sure. Right? Because those are intangible. Yep. And so it's something that's kind of, it's the stream of consciousness that goes through the organization that people are operating off of. And then, it creates that company culture. So, it's been a great career path so far, being able to interact with so many different types of people and organizations. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And I love the work that you're doing. Also, I think, like I said, it's an underutilized skill set for sure. And I guess just to bring it down to like its most basic form, because soft skills, some folks have heard of or understand what that is. Some folks may not, right? So, it kind of depends where you are in your career. But to you, how would you define what are soft skills?
Yeah, so soft skills, emotional intelligence, I would say in, the most simplest terms, it's really understanding your emotions as well as others' emotions. And, how do you react to that? So Daniel Goleman is one of the kind of the grandfathers, I guess you could say, of emotional intelligence.
Yep.
And one of the things that he has said is that the emotional brain responds more quickly than the thinking brain, which makes total sense, right?
For sure.
And I have this quote I think it's from Viktor Frankl, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't, I know the gist, right? Yeah. And I have it on my mirror. So it's basically between stimulus and response, there is a space. And within that space is the period in which you determine how you are going to respond. And so we have a choice to make in that space. We got to recognize that we have the space.
For sure.
And then we can respond accordingly. And, I think that's where you then apply those different quadrants, basically, of emotional intelligence. So, you have your self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. So those first two are all about the self, and really understanding you and who you are, what your strengths and weaknesses are, how you communicate, how you respond to certain things that people say in a certain way, right? There's the way that people say things to you sometimes triggers some kind of emotional reaction that you just go and you don't realize. Yeah. And then the other two, those are all about other people that are around you, and how are you managing those relationships and building them effectively and just being the best version of yourself that you can be.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Just as you were describing it, I was thinking about, how do people, how does one respond to certain situations or things just in the workplace, right? Because, if let's just say, you're working on a team project and, you don't get some news that, you really like, or maybe you get some feedback that doesn't really go to think that the way that you agree with, and you come off very negative, quote unquote, in your reaction, right? Like you could be labeled as, oh, well, you don't really receive feedback really well, or you're super defensive all the time, or, you don't listen to anybody except your own opinion, and then get boxed into this, quote unquote brand that you don't necessarily agree with, just because you may have come off, or just overreacted just for a second there. But like you said, the soft skills, the emotional intelligence piece of honing in on that to say that, okay, maybe I'm really pissed off right now, but I'm gonna temper how I react, or I'm going to think first, how I'm going to react to this before I come through with that, right? That's, I just think that's an easy example of how to, quote unquote, apply that, right? I mean, what do you think?
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's where that self-awareness and self-management becomes so important, because, I mean, you really have to kind of step outside of yourself in those moments where you're just like, man, I can't believe they said that, or like, this is not going the way that I wanted to. And so then you're starting to get real worked up, and then once you're at that stress level, then things become very foggy, right? And so then we can't think clearly on how to actually, properly react in the way that it's effective and that we're intending. And so how do you have that discipline and take that moment to say, okay, I don't like where this is headed, the way that it sounds, at least how I'm hearing it, because that's the other thing, right? It's, we interpret and receive information different, every single one of us, because we all have lived different lives. And so we see things through different lenses. And so you have to be respectful of that and understanding of that. So how do you kind of step outside of yourself and assess the situation? Like, this is what I'm hearing. And you can even communicate that back, right? Because sometimes when we say it back to somebody and say, okay, so this is what I'm hearing you say at A, B, C, D. And I'm just not sure that this aligns with what the intention was or what the goal is with the, whatever the issue is, since we're speaking in hypotheticals. And then at that point, that gives the other person the opportunity to then clarify or explain or elaborate on what their point is they're trying to make, or what the purpose is behind the why of what they said. So yeah, but it's a challenge. I mean, it takes practice, I think, to really be able to just be disciplined in your reactions, to ensure that you're able to build relationships effectively, because that's what it comes down to, right? I mean, that's what the corporate world is about. And I mean, the whole world, really.
Yeah, for sure.
But,
really.
Relationships are everything.
People tend to focus on the hard skills, right? Building their technical expertise, securing higher degrees, more education. Why do you think it's important for folks to spend maybe just as much time, or maybe even more time, right, on that skill set? Because we just tend to focus really on the hard skill stuff. And I don't know if it's just because of traditional schooling, right, or just, the way the education system is. I don't know, but it just it feels like when people think about, learning or trying to increase their prowess, they focus more so on the hard skills.
Yeah, I think that hard skills are valuable 100%, because you need those in order to do your job, right? But I do think that hard skills without soft skills, that's a tricky situation. That's a recipe for, I don't want to say disaster, because it sounds a little dramatic, but kind of.
Yeah, good, right? I mean, I feel like if you don't have any soft skills, I mean, I low key kind of think about like a robot, like you're a robot, like you're just a big computer, right? With no emotions. So
no, totally. Yeah, no, for sure. Because then, yeah, you lose that human aspect of yourself. And, it's even just like thinking about whenever you're writing emails. So, I mean, we're all in the corporate world. We're all just in the world. Emails are happening all the time, right? So, I mean, thinking about how you're communicating through those emails, are you just this is just like a very oversimplified example, but, are you being just very factual in how you're responding, or are you genuinely trying to, relate to the other person, or, acknowledge that they're another human, that they're a human with a life and, with all kinds of things going on. And so, yeah, no, I think that the soft skills piece becomes super important. And especially, I think as you begin to get into a little bit more of the advanced stages of your career. So, once you've established, okay, this is really, the path that I want to take, right? So you're building up those hard skills so that you can do the job, right? And then it's now the places that I want to go with these skills, with these hard skills. How am I going to do that? Well, you do need to have those soft skills, because in order to do that, you've got to have relationships. I mean, you have to have those relationships, and they can't be relationships that you just create the moment that you need them. They have to be relationships that you're building over a period of time, because you have to build that trust, and you have to build the rapport with people, or else they're not going to necessarily be willing to help you, or to then, help advocate on your behalf. So I think that the soft skill component it's a necessity to have alongside those hard skills, because you do need hard skills. That's a fact. But the soft skills are just so important, and they're intangible. So it's harder to hone those, because you can't take a test, or you can't like go in Excel and start working on them. It's practice in your everyday and in those interactions. And when you're faced with situations that are uncomfortable, or you're feeling like, I'm just so inadequate, this is terrible, and you get that fixed mindset going on. How do you find your way out and work on having that growth mindset, and just that discipline that comes with time and practice?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I think you hit on a lot of really, key points there. Is the relationships come out of the soft skills, right? So because you can have all the technical skills, the hard skills in the world, but if you don't have any relationships, you don't have any quote unquote soft skills to help build a rapport with people and to connect with people, then how are you really able to really do much, right? So unless you're a team of one and you work with no one ever, or you
does that exist?
Exactly, right? Like you need to be able to have soft skills. You need to be able to communicate. You need to be able to work with others, So but I think we take that stuff for granted, and we always focus. I say always, but I think a lot of folks tend to focus more so on the hard skills, than the soft piece. So I think that's just, great that you kind of highlighted that. But so I guess maybe in your own personal career, how do you think honing in on, EQ or emotional intelligence, how has that helped you advance your career?
Yeah, I would say that the self-management, self-awareness piece of things, meaning always being open to learning, and not feeling or portraying that I feel like I know everything. That like always being open to learning from others that have been there and that are willing to share information with you. That I would say that has really helped me, one, build relationships. So building those soft skills, because I genuinely, respect and want to take in that information, because if somebody's giving me information, I want to make sure that I store that somewhere. And then also if somebody's guiding me as far as, helping me through, especially like, so since I'm in the insurance world, there's a lot of technical stuff that goes on with that. So having somebody spend the time to walk through all of that and just asking questions, always being open. I mean, I think that those are two of the things that I feel have really helped quite a bit, because not only are you helping yourself, you're also helping others, and you're building the relationship at the same time. So it's kind of you're doing two things at once.
Yeah.
And so just always keeping that open-minded mindset, that has been helpful in asking questions. And then making sure that you do the follow-up and the follow-through. That's a big one. I think that when you do start executing on those things, you meet somebody at an event, or you are starting at a new job, or you're trying to build a relationship with certain people at work, just making sure that you do what you say, and that you have that, you build that reputation. I think that goes a long way. And then you do have a better opportunity for people to be able to, or to be willing to help you along the way, because they know that you'll put the time in and that you take it seriously. And so I think that, for me, I feel like that's been beneficial, and I've been able to interact with and be around all these very smart people. It's just thinking, I am so unworthy to be here. Yeah. But any of those types of opportunities, just making sure to take advantage.
No, that's a really excellent point. I mean, being able to adapt, right, to many different environments, having that certain level of EQ there, I think what helps folks who are able to be adaptable, right, versus, I speak this language, so if we're talking data analytics, then I'm all there. But if we're talking about sports or anything else, I'm gone. I can't even relate. Then, you're going to have a hard time really being able to build rapport with people from different walks of life. Right. And so, and I also think about, working as a leader. Right. So having that EQ in how you work with your team, or how to help lead folks in different parts of organizations in the work that you do. If you don't have that certain level, or not at least focusing on trying to hone in on the level of EQ that you have, then you're gonna have a hard time really getting through to anybody at the end of the day, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure, sure. Yeah, and building trust, and to your example, I think building trust is so important for exactly those reasons. So that's a soft skill. That's definitely a soft skill, because that comes with time.
Definitely. No, it makes sense. So what would you say for the folks that think, look, I'm not in sales, I'm not in marketing, does it really matter, whether I understand the intricacies of social interaction, right? Like, I sit behind a desk all day. Again, I live with data, and numbers. Why do I really need to hone in on this kind of stuff?
Yeah. No. Do you talk to humans at any point in your day? Even through a computer, are you talking to humans?
True. Chat. Right. DMs.
And so I think that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're in sales or what type of role you're in. Mm-hmm. Soft skills are instrumental. I mean, you absolutely need to focus on those, or need to value and focus on them in certain ways. It's like exercising a muscle. I believe it's something that you do want to intentionally practice, and it doesn't matter what your role is, and it doesn't matter, honestly, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, if you're in corporate America or not. That is something that, emotional intelligence, soft skills are things that you really need to have in everyday life in order to just be, to be the best version of yourself, and to be able to accomplish all of the things that you're setting out to do as a person. So, I think I think that the importance around it is immense, for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree with you. I think you kind of made some examples earlier about the nonverbal, right? Communicating through email, right? How many times have we all either read an email or sent an email that was misinterpreted, or maybe it was intended a particular way, but you really didn't want it to come off that way, right? Like that's the EQ piece of it, right? To be able to take a step back and maybe read something right before it's sent, to understand that, Some could interpret it this way, right? And maybe maybe it's intentional and you want it to, be a little spicy. So, hey, you send that off. But if you don't want it to be, then you got to tap into that EQ piece of it for sure. So, but nah, that's awesome. So pivoting maybe a little bit, right? Because we're kind of talking about all the elements of soft skills, but when it comes to leveraging your network, right? That's a big piece of it, right? So what do you think are some common mistakes you think that people use or do when it comes to trying to leverage their network?
One of the most common mistakes is building and trying to leverage your network with only when you need it, versus build it before you need it and nurture it. So one of the things, whenever we were doing the Accelerate program on soft skills, so one of the things that we talked about was specifically, how do you best leverage your network? And that's one of those components, is to build it before you need it, which really is, I think, kind of a mantra from, Keith Ferrazzi in his Never Eat Alone book. That's one of the things that he talks about. But the other thing is looking at your network as more of a community versus these are all the people that can help me get where I want to be, and thinking of it as more of a transactional type thing. Like, well, I'm in business and this is what I'm supposed to do. And these people are going to help me. Thinking about, okay, how do I build a community of like-minded individuals who are doing really different, interesting things that I want to make sure I am engaged with and that I know, because we do spend so much time at work. So we might as well make the most of it, right? So not only is it people that will potentially help you out at some point, but that can't be the driving force of you building relationships. Building relationships and building your network needs to be coming from a more genuine and authentic place versus the how are you going to be able to help me? And so I think it's again, what I was mentioning before is that follow up and follow through. So making sure that the people that you are interacting with at different events or at work or, outside of work, and maybe if they're vendors or business partners in some sense, referral partners, things like that, how can you build relationships with them that are not only focused on the work piece, but them as a person and, you valuing them as another person and who they are versus what they do.
That's a big one for me. And I completely agree with you there.
Yeah, no, well, I think it's a big one, and it's so tricky. It's because, I think it's hard to know, especially as you're building your career, you're coming out of college or, whatever it might be, wherever you're at, that is what networking is, right? Well, you need to network so that you get contacts and then you're able to, use that to, do X, Y, Z. Cool, great. But what they're missing in that is that it takes time. It takes time. So you can't just pop in and just be like, hey, I need these things. And what do you do? Oh yeah, that's good. What about you? What about you? It can't be in that type of, done in that type of way, because that's, you're going to get no help at all, ever.
Definitely. I mean, look, if you were early career and listening to this, think about it like this. If you met somebody for the first time that you network with, and a week later they message you and said, "Hey, let me borrow $100." What would you say to that? Right?
No kidding.
What would your reaction be? What would you even be thinking? Are you serious? Are you seriously asking me $100? Right? I don't even know you. Right? I just met you. It's the same thing. I know that sounds outrageous, but it's the same thing. You just met somebody, you barely have a very surface level interaction, a very surface level relationship, and then you come and ask for something or ask them to help you with this or ask them to help you with that. Come on, man, butter me up a little bit. Take me out to dinner. Show me a good time. Just do something a little bit just to make me feel good about this before you come and ask me for something. So, Yeah,
you got to get that goodwill built up a little.
Exactly. Goodwill. There you go. So, yeah, no, it's awesome. Okay, so again, pivoting, right? Just kind of hitting a little bit of these different elements of soft skills. And again, I love where this conversation is going. And I think you're dropping a lot of gems. But employee entrepreneur mindset, right? Like what does that mean exactly, right? We all know what entrepreneurs are and what that means. We know what it is to be an employee. And I think most people understand the difference between the two. But what does that look like? Like, what does that mindset, an employee entrepreneur mindset look like to you?
It really is looking at your career and thinking of it as your own business. How do you want to run your business? And what are the things that you're going to want to accomplish, and how are you going to do that? That's what I think employee entrepreneur mindset is, because then you put that into action. And I think, we were talking about this earlier, is that when you're in your career, you are your own best advocate. Mm-hmm. You have to be your advocate. Mm-hmm. No matter if you've got mentors or other people that you believe would vouch for you, they're not going to necessarily just go out there and start talking great things about you just unsolicited, right? Mm-hmm. So, you are your own advocate, and you have the power to build your career in the direction that you want to. And so it's mainly thinking as if you were an entrepreneur, how am I going to execute on my growth plan? Mm-hmm. How am I going to do that? What tools do I need to have? What skills do I need? Who are the people that I need to have strong relationships with, or that I want to have strong relationships with? And, making sure that, again, you're nurturing it, just like we were talking about nurturing your network and those relationships. And so that's really that mindset, and thinking of it. We talked about growth versus fixed mindset a little bit, and it's really working hard to stay in that growth mindset so that you are always moving forward and always looking for opportunities to learn and to grow and to develop, because as long as you're doing those things, you're moving in a forward direction, right? So if you have that more of a fixed mindset, then there's a very strong chance, or I would say it's probably like 100% chance that you become complacent. Mm-hmm. And then you are stuck in your cube, and you're in this world, and you're very isolated. And then there's no one advocating for you, including yourself. And that's the situation that you do not want to end up in. And that's opposite of having that employee entrepreneur mindset, right? Versus, having that just being stuck in a rut, and versus really trying to grab opportunities and be actively managing your career and, your business, which is your career.
Yeah. I think you said it very well. I think that makes a lot of sense. Like you said, treating your career like your own business at the end of the day, right? So the same way an entrepreneur will go out and do the marketing and the pitching and selling their business. And I mean, they are a walking billboard for their business. I mean, right. It's the same thing, right? You got to be a walking billboard for your own career, right? It's a part of your branding. It's a part of, the growth, right? And everything that you want to see happen in your career, right? So, and, not being, like you mentioned, focused in on just kind of your own little world, right? And you have to be able to continue to grow at the end of the day. And so, but no, I think that makes a lot of sense, because, sometimes it can get easy to just get caught up in whatever it is your work environment is, right? It's like, oh, I got a steady job. I got a good career. It's consistent. And that's just kind of what I am right now. And that's how it will be. But then layoffs come, or downsizing, or COVID, or something happens, right, where now your job could potentially be at jeopardy, and you spent the last 5, however many 10 years plus not really advocating for yourself, not really building on skills, or not really doing anything outside of just doing your job day in and day out, and mm-hmm. Then what, right? So
exactly. Mm-hmm. Well, and and I think to your point too, it's like, especially, I really think about whenever you're coming from college or you're starting your career, right? So you're having this transition period, whether it's high school, college, whatever it is that you're coming out of, into the workforce. There's just such a huge bridge that you have to cross when you're moving into that next phase of your life. And so, I think that, there's kind of like a myth, I guess, that like, if you just do your job and then you're going to be fine. Everything's going to be great, right? And maybe that's, a generational thing.
Yep.
I don't know. We don't need to, that's a whole other podcast, but,
yep.
But to really think about, it is not necessarily that you need to sit down 8 to 5, do a good job, and then that's going to be enough. It's you really, learning your craft, but also then thinking if that is the route that you're going, because listen, there's tons of different paths that you can take. So let's just say you are wanting to make sure that you specialize in something very specific. That's great. But then also where are you going to be headed? And how are you building your community around you? Not just sitting there and doing the job day in, day out and thinking that is going to then reap rewards and growth always. That's having that growth mindset. That's part of it. But I do think it's really difficult when you are making that transition where you've been in a school type environment and then you move into this corporate world or this workforce, and it's just completely different. And so you just have known that, okay, I just got to do all the work and then I get a grade and then I'm good.
Exactly. You're giving tons of direction, pretty much your entire schooling, right? Lifetime, right? Everyone's telling you, do this, you'll get an A, or do this, you'll do Y. But then, it's turned on its head. It's now you've got to own it. You've got to see the path. You've got to create the development. You've got to see the opportunity. And, and sometimes folks don't always switch out of that mindset, and they significantly rely on maybe their leadership or their managers or someone else are going to be telling them what they need to be doing. Like, no, you own that responsibility. I mean, of course, your leader has responsibility, right, to help you with that. But at the end of the day, you are your own biggest advocate. You have to be the one to be able to see the opportunity, to see the development and figure out, where do I need to grow? What do I need to get better at? Right. I mean,
100%. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So, there's a lot of, I think, material out there. I mean, self-help books and things like that, right? That kind of touch on soft skills. I guess I was wondering, are there any books or material that you would recommend that folks could maybe look into to improve in some of this stuff that we're talking about?
Yes, this is always the fun stuff when you get to share, your favorite things.
Yeah.
So I mentioned earlier, Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi. That one, it's a great book. It's very interesting, and it's a lot about that community building. And, he uses lots of different examples and walks through kind of the hows and, the ins and outs of that. So it's really just a helpful guide book. And it's also a really interesting read. And then I would say also one of my favorite people in the world is Adam Grant. I don't know if you follow him, but I love him.
I do.
And so one of his books, Give and Take, that one is, I would say it's not necessarily, it doesn't talk about soft skills like overly specifically, but it really is about, are you a giver? Are you a taker? And how, what types of people or actions are associated with each of those? How do you how do you kind of how do you become a hybrid of those? And just how that can affect your career and all that. And then the other one is Mindset by Carol Dweck. That book is where she talks about that growth mindset, fixed versus fixed mindset. It is such an interesting read. And it really does make you think. And I read that book a few years ago, and I would say I think about it on a weekly basis, probably, because, I think that while we all, I would say, especially people who are listening to this podcast, we all want to try to maintain that growth mindset mentality, but we all have fixed tendencies. And so I try to, whenever I'm in a challenging situation and I'm having a moment of self-awareness, it's like, okay, are you having a fixed mindset right now? That one it's a really interesting book, and it does give you some really good nuggets that you can reference just throughout your day.
Awesome. Yeah, no, and I'll make sure I include all these books, honestly, as good reference points, in the show notes, because, again, it's a part of the growth aspect is figuring out how, if I don't have these skills, what material can I read? How can I practice? How can I go about this stuff? And, and that was one of the great things. That's really how we met. That was one of the things I was trying to focus in on is the soft skills and going through, the Accelerate program, which was very awesome. But no, I definitely appreciate you sharing. So we covered so many different things. I feel like today it's hard to, compile all this right in a shorter segment, but, hopefully folks are taking notes here. Growth mindset versus fixed mindset, emotional intelligence, employee, entrepreneurial mindset, social interaction, leveraging your network, all this stuff. And it's just, YouTube University is out there. Google is out there. If anything, at least Google, at least Google some of this stuff, get more familiar and figure out ways, to get better. So at the end of the day, we're all working on this. This is a work in progress.
Always.
Yeah.
And I think when you're, to your point about resources and looking for things, we all have soft skills, right? Everybody has them. So it's a matter of, if you do read something, you can read articles, books, whatever it is, and then you can kind of pick up on certain things that maybe you can relate to, and then start building off of that. Like, oh yeah, I that did happen. And so that's a soft skill. That's going to help you kind of be able to identify and then, and then grow from there.
Awesome. So Lindsay, really appreciate you. You dropped a lot of great gems today. So really thanks so much for your time. I don't know if you want to share, any information about yourself or your businesses or anything else like that with folks, as we wrap up.
Well, thanks for having me. This has been a really fun conversation, a great way to start off the day. Like I'm ready to go now.
Yep.
And, I think that it's the only thing I would say to everybody is just to, really pay attention to those relationships and also focus on being, who you are. That's always the best default. And a lot of the times we're in a world where we're told we have to be a certain way, and it's always best to just be yourself and be honest. So
there it is. It is. Be authentic to yourself. Awesome. Great way to close this out. So appreciate you guys for listening. Thanks so much for your time. Hey, thanks for tuning in. For more content, please click the subscribe button and follow us on all social media platforms at How to Corporate. Until next time, keep building.